So let me bring on Stephanie Benedetto, who is the co-founder of Queen of Raw, Vanessa Barboni Hallik, who's the founder and CEO of Another Tomorrow, and Thomas Burkhardt, who is president of Marchon Eyewear. Okay, so yes, fashion's journey towards circularity. I guess, Stephanie, I'll start with you. If you could give us a high-level overview, definitions of what the circular economy is, and then how Queen of Raw fits into that.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for being here. And I think there are two key words in what you identified as the topic. The first is journey. Clearly, when I give you this definition, this is about a journey. We wouldn't expect everyone to change overnight. And the second part of that is the circular economy. And as opposed to that S word, sustainability, which means a lot of things to a lot of people, circular economy is an economic principle, right? And it has to make business sense. Otherwise, why is a company going to adopt it? And so the whole idea behind circular economy is, think of a circle, right? The longer that we can keep resources and materials in circulation in that circle, the more value and efficiency we get out of it, and the more money we save and make. And how do we do that? You do it by those great words: reusing, recycling, regenerating, repurposing, right? That's what it is. And I think we can overcomplicate things, but to simplify it at its core, that's really what this is about. And to frame kind of what we do at Queen of Raw and how we think about the circular economy, I just kind of wanted to myth bust two things very quickly. The first is that sustainability has to cost you more money to participate. I won't ask for a show of hands how many people assume that when you hear sustainability, it's something that's going to cost you more, right? Right, exactly. And the good news is, though, that by focusing, for example, like we do at Queen of Raw, on a business's waste, their unused inventory, raw materials and finished goods, businesses can sell it today and make money, free up that warehouse space. And then you can take that money and put it back into doing good work in your supply chain. You can pay your workers more. You can adopt more innovative, sustainable practices. You can do it without your overall CapEx expenditure going up. Right? Now that's a win-win-win. And it's how we think about it. One of our enterprise customers just the past few weeks took action on 10 metric tons of inventory. And in doing so, they were able to achieve 95% diversion from landfill and save $14 million in inventory and holding costs. So you can't really argue with that, right? Those kind of numbers. The second thing really quickly I wanted to touch on and myth bust is that circular economy, sustainability, only good for little pilot projects, little eco-conscious collections, right? How many people think about that? Just local. We hope to show the world that this can be done automated and at scale, leveraging technology. And that's where, with our business, we started Queen of Raw as a marketplace. Platform businesses buy and sell their unused textile waste, keep it out of landfill, and turn what would have been pollution into profit. But like any business, we've grown, especially as the needs of our enterprise customers have grown through the pandemic. And we now have full enterprise software so businesses can integrate it into their existing practices, find all the unused inventory, and take action with a click. Click a button, reuse, resell, recycle, and map, measure, and trace all the good work they did. So we can get into more about the blockchain and machine learning, but that's just a little bit on who we are and why we should be building for the circular economy, because it makes sense for people, for planet, but also for profit.
I mean, I love that. Turn pollution into profit. I'm going to get some T-shirts made or something on sustainably sourced materials, of course. Thomas, I think that really segues nicely into Marchon's work, because they're, I don't think people necessarily think eyewear sustainability, but there's a lot of waste and a lot of opportunity. So I'd love to hear what Marchon's doing.
There's a lot of waste, and a lot of that can be done. And hello, everybody. Most people don't associate waste with something like this, because if you're like me, the moment I get a new prescription, that goes in a drawer somewhere, and certainly doesn't get thrown away. But we found out fairly quickly that the people that buy our frames, and then people, our partners, we're a licensing partner for over 20 fashion and lifestyle houses, that they very much wanted to look at what can be done. And very few people, most people think there's a machine, their frame comes out. But what happens, particularly with acetate frames like this one here, it's a clear block of acetate, and then the frame gets cut out. So 90% of the material was throwaway. Actually, we had to pay somebody to take it away. And we've come a long way ever since. So now there's a recycling system in place. There's actually working with one of our vendors, Eastman, who were fantastic, figuring out a way how to repurpose that material so that's almost circular, i.e. the 90% waste go back into a block, gets cut out again, that 90%, so that at some point, every little shred of that material gets put back into the system. And to your point with scale, it started fairly quick, fairly small with us. The typical showboat projects very, very early on. Yeah, we can make a frame out of recycled bottles, but let's sell 5 of them. We very quickly diverted away from that, and it's by now, to give you one example, we use plant-based resin, plastic that is as much as possible devoid of fossil fuels. Once we had the technology down, once we had the costing in charter, we could just switch the entire production to it. So where there's a will, there's a way, and it worked out well for us, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and talking about scale, you work with some of the biggest brands in the business, Calvin Klein, Nike, I mean, Shinola. It's at scale, and it's already happening, so this is really exciting. And Vanessa, I want to talk to you. You had a previous life in finance. I want to hear about your aha moment, what sparked Another Tomorrow, and the mission behind it.
You know, I was pretty horrified by fashion as a system. So I did spend 15 years in emerging markets finance at Morgan Stanley, and I took a sabbatical ostensibly actually to move into ESG within finance. And it was this beautiful moment to just be really curious, and I was really trying to understand in greater depth, you know, how the majority of the big industries were really creating all of these negative externalities. And having followed the space for quite some time, most of it was fairly unsurprising until I got to fashion. And I was really appalled by the enormity of it, really just the scale of the impact, the complexity of it, and it's really incredibly systemic. And so, you know, really I looked across the landscape, and I was shocked also by how little brand leadership there was. You saw it in the outdoor space, where there's this really intuitive connection between the customer who's spending time in nature, values nature, wants to protect it, and understands brands that have that embedded in their business model. But really didn't see it across the broader fashion landscape. And it was obvious that there was a moral imperative to do it. There was a ticking time bomb in terms of the need to do it. And that on the consumer side, it was just a matter of time before they woke up. So there were sort of these concentric circles of being attentive to what you put in your body, being attentive to what you put on your skin, what you put on your kids in particular, and then thinking about really what you wear. And there was this really interesting disconnect between fashion as a personal expression and fashion, how it matches our personal values and how it's made. So Another Tomorrow really came to be as, one, an opportunity to really serve an underserved customer base. There was just a big gap in the conventional market. And really to build a company that could be kind of a living, breathing case study that this is possible and that it's possible at scale. And so scale is a big part of actually proving that out. And we've really embedded technology from the get-go in the business, and specifically digitalization, to really deliver on consumer-facing transparency, authenticated resale, some other commercial use cases like repurchase, frankly, and we've got a bunch of other exciting technology developments in-house these days.
Mm-hmm. I mean, supply chain still on the top of everyone's mind, and you have like an interesting phrase, farm to closet. Tell us a little bit about that.
You know, part of it, I think, is meeting the customer where they are and giving them analogies for things that they understand. And generally speaking, the average person that you talk to does not think about fashion as an agricultural product. And it either is, or it's made out of oil, or some form of oil. And now, you know, with some of the more innovative materials, they can be made of different things. But what we understood was that people do understand farm to table. They understand that idea of provenance and how that touches ecosystems, how that touches people, how that touches animals. And so that started to become the language that we use in terms of taking farm to table to farm to closet. And then obviously, you know, you don't really think about circularity in food, although waste is a major, major issue in the food system. But, you know, from there on, we really think about clothing as an asset. So farm to closet, and then clothing as an asset, and keep it in circulation.
Mm-hmm. And I do think, did you have?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. You know, I think it's hard and powerful to actually connect with your clothing in that way. And I think some of the challenges have been, right, when you go to that store to buy whatever that item of clothing is, I see two big challenges. The first is that, how do you actually know anything about that, right? What it's made of, where it came from, you know, what you do with it at end of life. A lot of times you don't, or you didn't. And the second challenge is when you get to that store and you see two articles of clothing that you like, one that's sustainable, one that's not sustainable, at point of purchase, it's very hard to actually pay a lot more, right? For that, even if it aligns with your mission and your beliefs. And so I think when we think about all the things, you're right, we need to both, one, be able to scan that QR code at point of purchase and see immediately the story, the journey, the history, the water, chemicals, right? Carbon emissions, oil that were used in the process, and connect with it and make a decision as whether it aligns with our values. And the second thing is you need to be able to get access to sustainable materials that actually cost you the same or less. And I think that's where we're unlocking now new value and new systems with repurposing, recycling, reusing, where you can actually get a sustainable product at the same price or a discount. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and Thomas, I remember we were talking about that was really one of the biggest pain points.
Absolutely, people. By the way, farm to frame, I'm going to adopt that.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Right away.
Dear.
It was a pain point, exactly this. And I don't also think it's not fair necessarily to put the consumer or the end user of your product to put that choice onto them. So that was, for instance, in this case. So the parameters for a brand, like we have a brand we own called Dragon, which is a surfer snowboarder brand, was founded in Southern California in the 90s, very close to the brands you described, and had a long-standing relationship with Surfrider Foundation, for instance, cleaning up beaches, etc. So we used that brand as a pilot program and said, okay, let them not have to make that choice. So switch it entirely, make sure it doesn't cost a penny more, which was the pressure on the raw material supplier, but they eventually came through and turned it into I wouldn't say, and I'm careful with my words, not entirely sustainable brand, but as much as sustainable, and probably one of the most sustainable brands in the industry. And that is not only respected by the end consumer, but also the retail partners have appreciated this. They now see a point of difference in a category, by the way, there's plenty of brands, nobody needs another more. And for me, that's almost the most motivating piece. I've never seen as much employee engagement behind initiatives as I've seen behind the switch to sustainable materials that we've had. Whenever we now have a marketing director for sustainability. Whenever she does, actually, I get requests whether she can do other corporate-wide updates, and when they come, we have probably the highest audience and engagement that we ever get. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we hear time and again, that employees are really driving this. They don't want to work for a company. That's part of the problem. And I guess I'll take this opportunity to plug that we have Dragon sunglasses available at our giveaway table. Please pick those up. Do you want to talk a little bit about those, why they're special?
They're special aids. They're made by us. Beautiful product, obviously.
They are.
No, but again, Dragon, brand with a beautiful, wonderful history, Southern California. It's if you're in the surfer or snowboarder circles, which I was not, you would know this brand. And the frames that you're seeing there, as I said, all the plastics that are used for those frames are now bio-based. They're actually made from castor beans. I remember when the first frame came around, I wore it for a year and tried to destroy it, left it in the windshield of my car and in the sun as much as I could, dropped it in salt water, and it stood the test of time and my abuse. So it is not recognizable to any other high quality materials. So enjoy them.
Great, thank you so much. And all of you have mentioned technology. Let's talk about that more. Blockchain, AI, machine learning, QR codes. I mean, maybe we could just kind of go down the line, improved recycling technology. Stephanie, tell us about how tech plays a role.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really does come down to how do we automate and scale these solutions across industries and around the world to really drive change and impact. At the end of the day, if my business is doing its job right, then you don't have to worry about the technology. That's our job, right? And we can deliver a solution that just makes it quick and easy to do what you need. But of course, that means leveraging powerful technology like blockchain, like machine learning AI. And the reason we started doing that is, yes, it's great to keep this waste out of landfill, and we wanted to sell it to others and keep it in circulation. But how do you actually know and trust when you're purchasing this stuff? Where does it come from, right? What is it made of? Who does it go to? And down, further on down the chain. And not only that, we added blockchain so that you can know with authenticity and integrity to the data, that journey, provenance, and history. But let's take it a step further, and now the business knows and understands, but what about the end consumer? And so we do connect that journey and history to that QR code, so anything made out of our repurposed, recycled, dead stock and unused materials can connect to that journey and history, and you as a consumer can trust what you get and that story. And then the final piece is, if you think about kind of selling waste, that's great, it's important, it's kind of just slapping a Band-Aid on the problem. You have waste, here, go sell it on Queen of Raw, make some money. How do you actually get to the root of the problem as a business and understand why you had it? And most importantly, how to intelligently minimize it going forward? Because waste, it's expensive. It's inefficient, right? And this is eating up bottom lines of businesses to the tune of 15% or more of some of our customers, and they didn't even know it. So now we call that data that we're collecting about that business and a tier 1 to a tier 14 supplier's unused stuff, and then help you predictively forecast and do better. And I think that's where we're really going with some of these technologies. How do we solve these problems today and also build for that better tomorrow?
I mean, waste. I mean, what business leader doesn't want to eliminate waste? And that's essentially what the circular economy is trying to solve. Exactly. Vanessa, another tomorrow in tech.
Yeah, so for us, I mean, really digitalization is at the core. And I think that there's so much untapped potential in this area. So the very first use case for us, as I referenced, was really consumer-facing transparency. So, we started out partnering with a company called Everything, which was subsequently bought by Digimarc. And essentially every item that we've ever made has been born digital. So it has its own unique digital identity that's backed up by data in a product cloud that goes all the way back in many cases to the farm level with certifications, et cetera. So you really have that inherent understanding. Same thing with wage data. We have a commitment to living wage work. But what we found is that this really becomes an infrastructure that you can iterate on continuously. So that first use case was kind of done and dusted at launch, but we've layered on authenticated resale. So we've basically been able to build an in-house resale program utilizing digital IDs for authentication and activation by the customer, which there are myriad, I'm sure every marketer in here that thinks about the activation potential for products for customers. And then layer on use cases beyond that. But I think that in order to do these things flexibly, you need that architecture from the beginning. And so it's something that I think has been really pivotal for us. In terms of blockchain, we've been somewhat loath to do it in a supply chain context because what we find is the level of sophistication on the technology side really differs dramatically in terms of where you are in the supply chain. And ultimately, bad data in, bad data out. So it's nice to be able to say that you have it, but ultimately, in our case, it felt like a little bit of a hammer in search of a nail. So we've decided to hold off for the minute on that end. On the go forward, it's very useful because you can start to have these event structures. Ideally, if you're treating clothing as an asset, it's not potentially just resold once, but many, many, many times. And there's real utility to being able to track the user behavior and through the life cycle of the product. So it's really kind of more forward-looking in a more circular context as opposed to backward-looking in a supply chain context for now.
It's a journey, right?
It's a journey.
Exactly. Thomas, I know it seemed like that was resonating with you. I know you talked about the manufacturers and how you're kind of reliant on them and their recycling practices. So how does tech play a role in the evolution of?
Really depends, similar to what you said. Really depends on who you're working with and where they're sitting in the chain. At the end, we try to make this very results oriented in the fact that we had the philosophy as we started this journey was really let's do first and then let's talk about it and really deliberately try to avoid buzzwords. Also, I developed a very close relationship with our in-house counsel who had to educate himself and had to educate us about what are claims that you can make and what are not. For instance, to the frustration of my team, even though we were using recyclable material, we couldn't always say that it's recyclable because we were not offering the recycling opportunities for it. So, and then you kind of have to dance around and educate yourself how you do this. So, no wide use of AI or blockchain at this point in time. This industry is still fairly traditional to this respect. But again, the results are going exactly in the direction where we want it, and that's all we need.
Yeah, exactly. So we're running short on time. We've got about a minute left. I guess I'd like each of you sort of rapid fire. Systems collaboration has really been a theme of today. Where do you see the fashion industry going in terms of circularity? And what do you want business leaders to know? How can they, join the journey?
Yeah. Well, I think, in the interest of being speedy, this is about the CEOs setting the corporate agendas, right? The CMOs doing the marketing and the storytelling, the CFOs dealing with this financial waste and liability on the books, the CIOs and the COs touching these materials and these supply chains every day. When you get all of them in a room, you realize the power and the value that can be unlocked. So as bad as fashion and textiles are to people and planet, it also means that fashion and textiles have the power to solve things like the world's water crisis if we rethink how we do things. So very excited to see where we're going, and we're just getting started.
A lot of potential. Vanessa?
We see a lot of potential for really kind of pre-competitive collaboration, and especially when it comes to laying the infrastructure for interoperability when it comes to these technologies. A lot of that's happening in Europe. The World Economic Forum has been leading. There's some really interesting conversations happening there. And ultimately, I think this is going to be really critical for businesses to actually meet the demands of regulation. And again, a lot of that's coming from Europe.
Yeah.
The last second, we're out of time. The last second that we have
Yes,
to
please.
question, for us, the question, or for the industry, the question really should be when and not if.
Now.
There we go.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie
you.
Benedetto, Vanessa Barboni Hallik, and Thomas Burkhardt.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.